wherever you are on your journey with alcohol and changing that relationship with alcohol, one of the things that's really, really important to do is to understand what the triggers are that trigger you to drink alcohol. Sometimes I think about them as being internal triggers and cues and external triggers and cues. So if we take the external triggers and cues, it's quite difficult off the top of your head just to think about, well, why is it I drink? What is it that makes me drink? But if we can break it down, maybe that'll make it easier. So are there any people that you associate drinking alcohol with? Any kind of like regular drinking buddies or people that encourage you to drink? Maybe it's family or friends or, I don't know, work colleagues. But are there any people that are triggers for you? The other external trigger is places. So are there any regular places that you associate drinking with? Like, do you tend to drink at home, or do you tend to drink in certain venues, like certain bars or pubs? Or are there other like high risk places for you? For example, train stations, or when you're traveling, commuting. Are there any places where you are more at risk of these unwanted drinking habits and behaviors? The other external cue as well, or the external trigger, is times. So are there any specific times that you might be at risk of unwanted drinking habits? So I have a lot of mums that I see in clinic, and a high risk time for unwanted drinking behavior is often at bedtime. So once they put the kids to bed or they put the kids to bath, that's when they think, oh, great, I'm going to reward myself with a glass of wine, which then turns into a bottle of wine. And that can be midweek. But maybe for yourself, maybe you know that your high risk drinking time is 5 o'clock on a Friday, or daytime drinking on a Sunday when you've gone out for Sunday roast, and that's where it starts at lunchtime and then spirals out of control over the rest of the day. So I guess, think about those external triggers: people, places. Are there certain times or even certain events, like sporting events or work functions, social events, anywhere that there's an external environmental trigger or cue that will prompt you to drink when you don't want to? So as well as those external triggers, there's also internal triggers which can cue us to drink. And those can be conceptualized in terms of internal thoughts or internal feelings. And it's really important to label those, I guess, to be mindful and to acknowledge and to recognize what are those thoughts and what are those feelings. So maybe you could think over, previous times where you've drank when you didn't want to drink. When you had those moments of unwanted drinking behaviors, what were the thoughts that were going through your head at the time? They might be positive thoughts. They could be kind of things like, oh, I'm having a really good time here. If I have a couple of beers, I'm going to enjoy myself even more. Or everyone else is doing this and I want to join in and it'll be great fun. But they could also be negative thoughts as well. And often they're negative thoughts like, I'm feeling really anxious, I can't cope, or I'm feeling really low in mood, I'm worthless, kind of hopeless thoughts, guilty thoughts. But everybody's unique. So with yourself, what are those kind of patterns of thoughts that you recognize that are associated, that might kind of spark a chain reaction of other events that lead to unwanted drinking behaviors? Later on, we're going to be talking about cognitive distortions and certain themes of thoughts, so things like permissive thoughts. But for now, I just want you to think about what those internal thought cues look like. Now, as well, I want you to think about what those emotional cues look like. What do those emotional triggers look like when you're drinking? For some people, it might be kind of feeling really excited. It might be feeling really happy. It might kind of have this feeling of community, cohesion. But again, sometimes there's some negative emotions associated with drinking. And that might be things like loneliness, boredom, kind of feeling stressed or anxious and overwhelmed. But for you, what are those emotional triggers? that spark the unwanted drinking behaviours. Now, if you're using the Curb app, you'll notice that we ask you on a daily basis to make a pledge. We also ask you to identify what some of those blockers might be to you being successful with your pledge. The reason why we do that is because we really want you to think more mindfully about what those triggers are in your life. Because if you can identify those triggers, then we can start to support you to manage them better. And maybe initially it might be that you have to avoid some of those triggers or develop coping strategies for those triggers. But unless you know what those triggers are, it's very difficult to, to anticipate those high risk moments where you might be vulnerable to unwanted drinking behaviours.